Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. It's always a bit of a risk of the technology, but it's good to welcome you this morning to our event, which is the final event, for the research intelligence function around the Superfast broadband business exploitation project. So, welcome to you all. The title of our event today is Digital Technologies in Wales: Economic Impacts and Policy in Turbulent Times. My name is Max Munday. I'm the director of the Welsh Economy Research Unit at Cardiff Business School, and for the last 5 years I have been leading the team within the university that has been looking at the impacts of digital adoption on small and medium-sized enterprises in Wales. And there'll be a little bit more about our research program as we run through this morning. As I've said, the focus on the first day, the seminar takes place over 2 days, 2 morning sessions. So this morning 10 till 12 and tomorrow 10 till 12. The focus of this first day's proceedings is very much around research findings and business support. We have four core speakers this morning. We have 2 from the university, Doctors Laura Norris and Laura Reynolds, who will be talking to aspects of the research program around SME adoption of digital technologies and the effects of that. And then later in the morning, we have David Marnell from Serco speaking around the issue of digital adoption and its use in an SME context. And then our final speaker is Professor Pete Burnap from Cardiff University, who will be speaking to digital economy developments in Wales and business support. In between those 4 speakers at 11 o'clock, we're very pleased to welcome the Deputy Minister for Economy and Transport, Lee Waters, who will be addressing the conference between 11 and 10 past 11. So we look forward to welcoming him. Just a few matters before I press on. Just a few items of housekeeping. There will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of this morning session. So when all the speakers finished, there'll be an opportunity for Q&A, and that will be through myself. Please, if you would like to make use of the meeting chat function. When the speakers are speaking, could you please make sure your mics are muted for sound quality purposes, because we are recording the sessions here as well. If you do have any technical difficulties with the Microsoft Teams, could you in the first instance please just to try and log off and log on again, and say please remember the event is actually being recorded. Just finally, you can use the hashtag SuperfastConf20 in any social media posts around the event, and a hyperlink to our report will be made available in the comments box and will be sent to attendees after the event. Okay, so I'm going to hand over now to our first speaker this morning, Laura Norris, who's part of the research team in the Welsh Economy Research Unit. And Laura is going to speak to some of the key findings from our digital maturity survey for Wales for over the period 2016 to 2020. So thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Max. Good morning, everyone. As Max said, I'm one of the lawyers of the team. I'm also one of the research associates. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the Digital Maturity Survey, or the DMS as we call it. If you remember my presentation from the previous event, this was, I'll be going through the similar figures, giving you an update on the highlighted figures, and also then giving you some comparison across the 5 iterations, because the survey is run for, the dates are 4 years, but there's been 5 iterations of the survey. And also of note then that the 2020 survey took place over the summer, so we'll incorporate many of the factors from obviously the series of lockdowns that we've had and all the events that have unfolded in the last year. So the Digital Maturity Survey itself accepts that digital technologies play a central role in both business and society, and it seeks to examine digital technology use in Wales's SMEs and seeks to understand this change over time. So this is why we've had 5 iterations of the, 5 iterations of the survey, and then also we have the case studies, which the other Laura will be speaking about more later, and to drill down to some more depth as well. So this explores the emerging digital economy and informs Welsh Government interventions. So some of you in the audience will have been providing these interventions, giving the support in the workshops, and others of you will have been receiving them. So the Digital Maturity Framework looks at ICT resources, ICT use and business performance, and looks to understand how all these factors sort of coalesce to impact the digital economy development in Wales. So the adoption of broadband. Superfast adoption across Wales has increased by 26 percentage points from 2016 to 2020. So as you can see, this is a significant increase across the years, and we're levelling out at around 60, just over 60% of SMEs in Wales have adopted superfast broadband. The highest concentration of these superfast users are ICT, business and other services, and this is to be expected. Those sectors that are predominantly standard broadband users are accommodation and food services. So SMEs in South East Wales are most likely to have adopted superfast, North Wales 60%, and then Mid Wales and South West Wales are in the at the lower end of the scale. Apologies, it doesn't seem to. Oh, there we go, and we've skipped 2. There we go. Technical difficulties, no matter what, isn't there? So the adoption of broadband, my research particularly has been looking at and a few of us have been looking at the sort of the rural-urban development of these broadband technologies, because digital technologies can help rural SMEs overcome some of the difficulties that are encountered due to location. So from 2017 to 2020, there was a 23 percentage point increase of rural business adoption. In the same period, there was 15 percentage point urban business adoption increase. So this gap between the ability of rural firms and the availability for superfast broadband for rural firms and urban firms have closed, which is really important to help the competitiveness of rural firms. And this gap is reduced by 8 percentage points from 2017 to 2020. So 46% of these rural businesses are reporting achieving download speed of 30 megabits per second or more. So they're all also receiving significant speeds. The share of the SMEs with over half the workforce immediate or above IT skills. We looked at 2016 to 2020, this proportion has increased by 17 percentage points. ICT are the highest at 87%, and then business and other services at 76%. So this remains the highest concentration. This has been tracked across the 5 iterations of the survey. These are the sectors that usually have the highest level of IT skills. So the wholesale and retail sector, the transport and storage SMEs had the lowest concentration at 50%. In previous years, this has been the industry most likely to have the lowest concentration has been the construction industry, and this is something I'll speak about a little bit later on. So the larger the SME, the more likely they are to report that they have internal ICT specialists. This comes down to financial capacity and obviously the demand for the level of activity that is going on. So there's been a levelling of urban SMEs and rural SMEs that report a majority of employees with intermediate IT skills. So again, this is really, really important for if we're thinking in terms of regional economic development. These developments are really good for rural SMEs, and I'm sure Laura will be speaking a little bit about some of those developments later on. So the use of cloud computing services and the general ICT resources, there's been an increase by 23 percentage points from 2017 to 2020. By sub-region, there's more use of advanced cloud services in South East Wales. This is stabilised at 88%. From 2019. This is followed by Southwest Wales, and then Mid and North Wales both rest at 77%. So whilst there are regional differences, there's over 11%. It's not as significant a range as in other instances. So the retail, wholesale, transport and storage and construction have the highest use of advanced cloud application. And it's this development within the construction industry that, with the previous slide, I was talking about the concentration of use. The construction industry, we're seeing evidence of an ongoing digitalization process with the introduction of the sort of the BIM technologies and the BIM processes, which is online 3D modeling. And there's a lot of information then that is shared digitally between SMEs and with their customers. Not unexpected that there's been a 31 percentage point increase from 2019 to 2020 video conferencing use, and the increase in the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence and additive manufacturing, which is the 3D printing, has increased 1 percentage point from 2019. So a nominal increase, but an increase nonetheless. So the share of e-sales. It's stabilised at around 80% of SMEs are selling something online and selling, to varying degrees. So the percentage of SMEs reporting no e-sales whatsoever has reduced 29 percentage points from 2016 to 2020. It's interesting here because obviously many SMEs, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, have had to innovate how they're offering services. I know certainly in my local area, there's far more people now selling stuff online, but the level is comparable with 2019. Obviously, this is subject to the people that have responded to the survey as well. So it is influenced to some extent by the sample. So as in previous years, the accommodation and food services and the information and communication sectors has had the highest share. Rural SMEs remain more likely than urban SMEs to report a majority of their total sales being e-sales. So this is really important. Rural firms are using digital technologies to address their distance from markets in alternative ways. And the primary channel for generating e-sales for SMEs is via their own website. And this is as opposed to using sort of auction sites like eBay and boutique sites like Etsy. Other ones are available and they don't all begin with E, but those are the two examples I could think of right now. There we go. Annual IT costs. I'm enjoying these delays. It just shows that digital technologies aren't perfect, I guess. The number of SMEs that reported a dedicated IT budget fell 5 percentage points from 2016 to 2020. Whilst there's obviously been some significant fluctuations this year, because, I mean, myself, like I'm sure many others of you, have had to have either equipment bought or borrowed to be able to work from home with any kind of Level of productivity. So there's some fluctuation in the numbers from one year to another. But overall, there's a downward trend on hardware, software and network costs, and there's an increase in broadband subscription costs. So this shows us that more and more SMEs are using, more digital channels to operate. So for those of you that are familiar with our Digital Maturity Index, here's a reminder. For those that you aren't, here's an introduction. So we've classified over the years, we've developed this classification of SMEs to understand how they engage with digital technologies and the extent to with which it's integrated into their business models and into their daily operations. So there's those that are digitally disengaged. They tend to be standard broadband users, high proportion of employees with, pardon me, with below average ICT skills. So the majority do not use digital technologies and report no sales from online transactions. I'm going to do the very risky thing of taking a drink over my laptop, but there we go. Passive exploiters tend to have standard broadband, more likely to use a few cloud-based applications and make some use of e-sales online. Then we move to the active exploiters, high proportion of staff with above average ICT skills, likely to have Superfast and use a wider range of digital technologies. And then those that are digitally embedded have Superfast, a very high proportion of employees with above average ICT skills and use a number of digital applications. To some extent, whether some industries are able to join these categories will be influenced with how they do business, but overall, because there's a range of factors that we use, it's possible to categorize these SMEs. So how has the Digital Maturity Index developed over the years? As you can see, there's sort of, well, a fairly steady categorization in each sector. But what we've found from our trends from over the 4 or 5 years has been that medium-sized businesses had the highest proportion of digitally embedded SMEs. South East Wales had the highest proportion of digitally embedded SMEs, and SMEs in the ICT and accommodation and food services sector had the highest proportion of firms in the digitally embedded category. But in future evidence might show is that there are things like the ongoing digitalization of the construction industry. So an example would be that one of our case study companies, they used BIM for business information modeling for one project, and they realized that it was excellent. So now that's an added extra and a competitive advantage that they use in all of their processes. So this then will begin to track through the figures. So the performance of SMEs with superfast broadband. What can be evidenced here is that in varying years, different factors are more important to businesses. It's also remembering that these figures will reflect the outside economic environment. So things like Brexit, things like the COVID-19 pandemic will all be reflected in these figures because they reflect SMEs' confidence in their operations and their ongoing outcomes. But what we can see here is that in varying years, turnover, profit, innovation and employment have all been significantly impacted by superfast broadband. And so there's a good range of benefits that are coming out for SMEs. Those that have superfast more frequently report benefits. So this may be due to the greater use of digital technologies or a number of other factors. We added some additional questions into this year's survey to be able to try and capture some of the responses to COVID-19, understanding that obviously this made the survey a bit longer, but we're very grateful many people filled it in, and we'll be able to gain some information. This is obviously in further detail in the digital maturity survey report. page document, so this is some of the broad headlines, but if you want more information, obviously that's available there. But significantly, there are rural and urban differences in enable greater remote working by staff. So this again might contribute to some spatial inequalities for rural firms, because this is influenced not only by the availability of broadband at the business premises, but the availability of broadband for their staff also. And there was less confidence in rural firms for building future remote business practices. And this might be linked to the habitude of using these technologies, the continuity of connection. I mean, yesterday, I'm in Llanelli. Yesterday, I had pretty much no broadband, and I'm very grateful it's turned up today. So obviously that impacts how you're able to engage with these technologies. Oh, and Llanelli is not that rural. Rural SMEs, however, are more likely to move into new product or services activities. So this is really good. It just shows that people are innovating in and around using these digital technologies. And notably, many businesses use the furlough period to engage with digital technology. So they had the time and the space, and this has been reflected across a lot of our case study research, is that the time and space and the ability to engage with digital technologies can be more difficult, particularly if you're a smaller firm, because you're running your business on a day-to-day basis and also trying to upskill yourself. So these are the sort of the responses. There's those, the moving into new products or service markets was ranked the lowest. Obviously, enhanced use of video conferencing has shot through the roof. But greater remote working by staff, minimising the decline of sales, that's been important. Seen a lot of sort of micro innovations where people now are selling things online, selling takeaway foods to collect, and that type of activity. The expected turnover performance of Welsh businesses. Now, these figures show how difficult it can be to establish these figures, because they wholly reflect not only the use of digital technologies, but the outside economic environment. So these figures will be impacted by Brexit, they will be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, they will be impacted, in the future in these rolling short lockdowns and so forth. So there may be a levelling off of the benefits that are experienced from the adoption of digital technologies, because they might be that many of our have now adopted digital technologies to the extent that they wish to, and they feel that is currently integral to their business operations. But also there's falling business confidence will be reflected in the figures, and they are influenced by the sample SMEs. So as I was saying with the Digital Maturity Index, there are some industries that are able to digitalize their services to a greater extent. So obviously things like the hospitality industry, they're obviously very much at the forefront of the news at the moment. They will experience more difficulties in digitalizing their services. But they said there are very appreciable turnover benefits, even based on the conservative 1% estimates that we use as a team. At the same time, with all this economic uncertainty, there's the possibility we don't have the counter narrative, and there's the very, very strong possibility coming out in the data that broadband technologies have mitigated potentially worse impacts. For example, the ability for ourselves to continue having our final conference today digitally, that without these technologies we wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have been able to continue working without these digital technologies. So that again is a very important influence. So that's a quick whistle stop tour of the DMS and the DMI findings. All our reports and data can be found at our website. You'll have the case studies there and the horizon scanning reports. And if you have any inquiries also, we have the email address that you could contact us. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Laura, and again, thank you very much for keeping to time on that. Well, Our second second speaker is Dr. Laura Reynolds. She's also been working with the Welsh Economy Research Unit on our Superfast broadband project, and much of her work has focused around horizon scanning exercises around new technology and case studies of digital adoption in SMEs. So I'm now going to hand over to Laura, who will summarise some of her work. Thank you, Laura.
Hi. Great. I'll just get the screen up. There we go. That should be up now. Everybody can see. Hi, thanks, Max. As Max just said, I am also a research associate within WERU, and today I'm presenting two further parts of our research programme, which is our case studies that the other Laura mentioned just, and also our horizon scanning research reports. So to start with a brief overview of our case studies, throughout the research programme from 2016 until late 2019, we conducted 50 interviews with 38 different businesses across Wales, looking at a range of different factors, from their access to superfast broadband to their use of different digital technologies, and to some of the outcomes that this meant for the business and then the region in which they were based. And this allowed us to showcase the businesses that we included on our website, providing practical information for other SMEs across Wales, but also for us to better understand the way that businesses are becoming more digitalised and using superfast broadband and their enabled technologies. So here are a selection of our different case studies, and we spoke to a range of different businesses from across Wales, from the different regions of Wales, and also across different sectors. And they varied in terms of their digital maturity. We had some that started off more digitally mature, and also those that didn't really use many digital technologies, but were hoping to use broadband to improve this and to enhance their business models by adding some additional digital elements. Recently, we created a case study synthesis report where we put together all of these findings under 3 different areas, which I'll run through very briefly with you today. And these include the antecedents to digitalization. So what were the barriers and what were the enablers that enabled our businesses to uptake digital technologies? And then I'll look very briefly, because Laura's just gone through in depth on these areas, some of the ways that they were using digital technologies within the business, and then cover some of the outcomes based for the business, the workers, and also the region. So in terms of the barriers and enablers, to start with the enablers, as Laura just set out, businesses are using more and more digital technologies. These largely were more of the incremental, the everyday digital technologies, but as I'll go on to say, also some of the more advanced and potentially disruptive digital technologies. And in part, this was because of changing expectations from both the customer, but also different industry expectations. So as the digital technologies became more and more of a norm, customers began to expect a certain standard of digitalization, which meant the businesses were therefore sometimes needing to adapt at a quicker rate than they may have otherwise. But also in relation to industry, with construction being a noteworthy example, regulatory demands and procurement meant that sometimes the industry needed to become more digitally mature, to be more transparent and to respond to these heightened expectations. But also, as we saw throughout the programme, there was additional financial, educational support and infrastructure with the rollout of superfast broadband across Wales. However, there were a number of barriers that meant that the digitalisation process was not necessarily equal for all businesses that we spoke to. Particularly nearer the beginning part of our programme, we saw that there were some differences in infrastructure and connectivity, which again, Laura has just ran through in her presentation, so I won't go into too much depth on this, other than to say that there was positive signs in our latter case study interviews as the programme was drawing to a close, that these infrastructure gaps were beginning to decrease across the region. However, there was still a cost involved, and for some SMEs, particularly the micro firms that might just be 1 or 2 full-time staff members, this could be quite costly. It could be the cost, the capital investment needed for the hardware, but also an ongoing expectation to pay for subscriptions and licenses, One of our case study businesses, for example, explained how they paid £1,000 a month for different licenses, which they saw as a priority, but for other businesses, this wasn't something that they could afford. Also, another barrier related to levels of ICT expertise within the business. It really relied on having somebody to showcase and push it forward, but also having a team that had this level of skills and confidence too. However, as Laura set out, and as I will just very briefly note, there were a range of different digital adoptions across the SMEs. And while the incremental and the gradual changes were the most commonplace in relation to communication, the back office processes, and marketing and promotions, we did also see that some of these more disruptive and transformative adoptions were occurring, such as AI and automation that I'll mention in more detail in the Horizon scanning section, but also the 3D printing, the 3D modeling and design. So there were a number of more digitalized advancements. In terms of outcomes and what this might mean for SMEs now but going forward, we broke these down into 3 areas. In terms of the business performance, the most commonly cited benefit was cost and time efficiencies. The businesses were finding that things that used to take potentially days could now be almost automated and cut a lot of time and expense for the business. Also, it meant that they could extend their market reach. Maybe that was locally, nationally, but also internationally. And it gave them, as Laura set out, a greater competitive advantage, but also a level of transparency. They could store all of their data and their records that they could present when required, enabling this security and transparency within the business to be enhanced. In terms of workers and the labour market, as we have seen this year, remote working is made possible by digital technologies. And this is something that already our businesses were noting, but this is something that in the last 12 months will be even more important. But also it changed the way that we see digital skills. Not only are they being seen as a necessity for the businesses we spoke to, but there are also a range of additional training that could be done online for cheaper that might help to improve the skills of the workforce. And in terms of some of the regional implications, it meant that both businesses and workers could have more choice. Again, as Laura set out in terms of this urban and rural, it could mean that businesses might choose to locate themselves in a rural location and access staff and supplies from all over Wales and beyond. But it also meant that, again, the customer extend beyond the local and include international. One of our businesses spoke about how they could be based in their hometown in Wales, but retain their client base in America, but without all the costs involved of the travel in which they'd used to have to endure. Also, in terms of who the businesses can have on their workforce, a wider range of people, they can attract skills from further afield if they do not need to be in the locality. So these were some of the potential outcomes that the businesses set out. However, the main aspect I want to run through with you today was our Horizon scanning programme, of which we undertook 7 specific reports and then a synthesis report, looking at a range of different factors and how they might influence digitalisation. And these were sector specific in terms of construction, but also the more low-tech foundational economy, but then the way the business operated through the business models, the change in cloud computing, automation and AI, but also we looked across geography and looked at the 3 Welsh economic regions and the rural opportunities report. And again, from this, which is also available online, we developed a synthesis report collating these around 3 key themes: digitalisation in relation to business and sectors, digitalisation for employment and work, and digitalisation and geographical space. So one of the key factors of this was digitalisation and the business and sectors. So as both myself and Laura have noted throughout, incremental changes were the most commonplace. However, more advanced forms of technology were also allowing for changes in the business model. But combined, there could be significant changes to the way that the businesses operate, from the customer interfaces to the way it communicates with its suppliers, producers, distributors, to even the creation of new products and services, as Laura set out in her presentation. And it meant that businesses were able to create, and will in the future be able to create, more creative and competitive business models, and they could change almost the entire way the business operated by using these advancements in digital technologies. However, the way that they were able to do so is highly variable depending on the business size and the sector in which they operate. So as we've noted a few times now, one of the areas that we looked into in depth is in relation to construction. And the report on this looked at the way construction and digitalization, it wasn't something that necessarily had been an aspect that they were digitally mature in the past, but because of changes in regulation and digital technologies that have emerged, now 3D modeling and the use of BIM is becoming a necessity, something essential, something that the businesses are finding useful, but also something that's needed for regulation and procurement. And this more advanced technologies, they come with challenges in terms of enabling the construction workforce to adapt to these digital technologies, but also many opportunities in terms of collaboration and safety and transparency. But then in terms of the AI and automation report as well, we note that this doesn't need to be some of the more large scale businesses, the large innovative businesses. AI and automation can have a significant impact for SMEs too. And although it's largely likely to be add-on at present, and this might rely on a workforce to almost support and to supplement it, and also large databases of information, it's already becoming quite commonplace in some SMEs in terms of their customer interfaces and the use of chatbots. However, before these more advanced technologies become more commonplace, there is still a need to gain customer trust and to ensure to people that the data is being used safely and securely. However, we didn't just look at the more advanced technologies, we also looked at some of the more low-tech sectors, so that we did a report on the foundational economy, which is the everyday businesses that we use and we see all around us. It can range from healthcare to social care, to our local shops and hairdressers, and the way that digital diffusion can help these previously overlooked sectors. And we found that some of the digital tools can really help support some of the societal challenges facing health and social care, but also support some of the local businesses too in their everyday business opportunities, and really provide perhaps a lifeline to these foundational businesses. On top of that, we found that cloud computing is the most commonly used of all, and is really replacing in a large part the need to have the hardware in place, and instead cloud computing is becoming what businesses use, which can be a cheaper alternative. And it's not just used in terms of the storing and retrieval of data, but can influence a whole range of the business model, the whole range of the business operations, from marketing to sales to promotions. And this is something that's already commonplace, but likely to extend even further into the future. But as we've noted throughout, any uptake is not without its challenges. And this relates to financial resource and skills. And while some businesses might have these already in place, for those, particularly the smaller businesses and in the more rural areas, these barriers can still be problematic. Next of our themes is employment and work. And as we've noted throughout, this digitalization process meant that people no longer need to be in a prescribed office location, as we've noted with today and over the period of COVID, that people being able to work from home now and remote working is a huge contributing factor to how business has been able to continue. However, it's not necessarily all positive. There are fears of the risk of job losses and the changing nature of work, and this relates primarily what we discussed in our AI and automation report. However, as I noted, at present, the use of AI and automation is normally to supplement rather than replace the workforce, and is being used alongside the particular labour. And this is what labour augmentation means, that the technologies are supporting the workers' tasks. However, with these changes, there's requirements for skills and a certain level of expectations, which can have benefits and negatives for the workforce. It can mean that they enhance their skills, but also that greater expectations might mean that some that are not as comfortable with digital technologies therefore struggle in the workplace. However, some benefits, again, we noted that the digital tools might offer greater dissemination of knowledge across and within sectors through digital networks as well as offline networks. And finally, we looked at the horizon scanning reports in relation to the geographical space. And as Laura already noted, there are some differences in the rate of digital adoption across Wales, with South East Wales adopting the most digital technologies. However, many of the challenges remain shared across the 3 economic regions in Wales. And in fact, in the RORA report, we see that there are these significant improvements in rural connectivity, and that these are encouraging because they're allowing businesses to relocate and diversify their operations, which might bring benefits to the regions, both socially and economically. Okay, and that was quite the whistle-stop tour. I just wanted to provide an overview today, but all of the detailed reports are available on our website. But yes, that brings my presentation to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura, and again, thank you very much for keeping to time. That was a very interesting tour of the work there on horizon scanning and case studies. Okay, well, I'd like to move on to our next speaker, and I'm pleased to welcome David Marnell from Serco. David is Head of Business Services at Serco Employment Skills and Enterprise, and he's been very closely involved with the rollout of the Welsh Government programme in terms of guidance and advice to SMEs. So I very much look forward to hearing what he's got to say. His talk is entitled Digital Adoption and Use in an SME Context, and clearly he's talking in the around the context of the Superfast Business Wales programme. So thank you very much. Over to you, David.
Yeah, Borodar. Good morning, everybody. So as Max had mentioned, my name's David Marnell. I'm the Head of Business Services responsible for Superfast Business Wales. What I've been asked to cover off today as part of the event is really just to give you a quick overview of the service, outline sort of the audience that we've been working with over the last 5 years of the programme in Wales, so the demographic, what they've actually adopted based on the intervention and the recommendations they've received from us, and then basically this sort of blended approach to new ways of working as we progress into 2021 and beyond. So if you're not aware of the Superfast Business Wales programme, this is a national programme that operates across all 22 local authority areas. It mobilised in January of 2016, and we started to work with businesses as of March of that year. So we're just coming up to around 5 years of activity. We're basically, the program's designed to give independent advice and guidance to micro, small and medium-sized businesses around all aspects of technology. So we sit in this wider body of business support that's available in Wales. So you have the Business Wales programme, which helps entrepreneurship and growth-orientated businesses, Accelerator growth programme, which supports high growth, so those have got great potential to grow further. And then you've got lots of sector-based support as well, so Social Business Wales, Farming Connect and everything else. And we sit in the middle of all of this, but we're the specialists who talk to businesses around technology. So broadband is a utility, it's like gas and electricity. It's what you do with it that actually makes the difference. So we are sort of going into businesses on a day-to-day basis, and we'll look at all aspects of their technology, from their infrastructure to the software to the digital marketing, and considering things like the systems and processes and around cyber risk and data protection and everything else. But I'll talk through the process of how we do that in just a second. As already outlined in the previous presentations, the activity and the benefits around new technology, if we get it right, we can help businesses reduce their costs, make them more efficient, and especially in the current climate at the moment, make them more resilient and look at diversification in new ways. Ultimately, businesses want to grow their sort of profit, so grow their revenue and income. And we see a lot of that activity take place as well as a direct result of our intervention. The programme is designed really, I think, to take a business through a logical thought process. What we want to do is take them away from their perceived needs and help them actually identify what their real core root issues are and what their real needs are for the business. And we want to then start the process of introducing them to solutions and recommendations, but we can only do that if we've got their support and buy-in. So it's important that they feel confident to proceed. So the program's been designed in a way that takes them through that logical thought process so they have that confidence to take it forward if they have that capability and capacity to do so. So stage one of our customer journey is talking to an online business advisor. This can be done remotely, so through telephone or video conferencing. The idea really is to set expectations on the offset. So we do a lot of partnership-based activity, so with other organisations to help promote the service. We do a lot of directive and stimulative advertising to promote the programme. And to date, that's generated around 10,500 inquiries. And we've registered about 7,500 of those businesses onto the programme. But we make it quite clear at the offset. We're not there to plug anything in. We're not there to audit the systems or project management or anything like that. We're really there just to give them that assessment. So we set expectations from the offset very clearly. If they want to proceed, we'll take them through the registration process, and through that we'll help define what their initial needs are. So we will sort of expand on it slightly. We won't do a diagnostic, but we'll want to sort of inquire more about, what systems and processes they're currently using at the moment, what they're struggling with, give them a few considerations to think about. It might broaden their horizons in relation to what their sort of next steps are through the support. If a business isn't interested or they're not ready to engage, we'll sort of try and identify what are the supports available to them, so we can signpost them over to other sort of business support programs or local networks, or potentially more recently over the last sort of 9 months to financial support that's available to them as well. This process, is done by telephone traditionally by most ends, but we've seen a very high level of adoption of video conferencing through this through the last six to 9 months, I suppose, with the pandemic. So we're seeing that face-to-face interaction with customers, which is really good. It's not something we traditionally saw prior to COVID. Everyone pretty much was doing it by the telephone. Stage two of the customer journey then is where we sort of we've identified the needs at stage one with the customer, and we book them onto what we call our Inspiring Action workshops. Now, these are designed to basically introduce the individual to the art of the possible, what good practice, best practice looks like in regards to technology terms. So we've designed them to be subject or sector specific, and we've got around 13, 14 modules of content that we deliver at the moment. We've delivered a lot of these events. We've delivered about 800 physical workshops, and since COVID, we've delivered about 300 webinars. So every single month, we're delivering between 20 and 30 webinars at the moment, and they've got great feedback from businesses. Around 98% of businesses say that it's actually had a direct benefit to the business. So when I say subject specific, we're seeing lots of businesses use online technologies like Office 365 and Google Docs, but they don't really use it in the right way. They don't understand the full functionality of it. So Microsoft Office 365, for instance, is a great workshop because it takes you away from just looking at the email and file storage components of it to using the automation and Power BI and various other ways, Power Forms and stuff like that you can use, and different ways of actually looking at the data and how it can influence some of your business decisions. So this workshop is really designed to introduce them to everything, with a view then of when they move on to the next stage, we can refine that down to see what's relevant to their business. But all the information is available on the website in relation to the modules and the dates of activity. And if anyone's interested in attending one of these and you're not engaged in the program, more than welcome to come and join one of those sessions. So the next stage then after that is stage three, which is the sort of final stage of our customer journey. And this is where we deliver the tailored one-to-one support. So we have a team of digital business advisors throughout Wales. They're all very experienced business advisors with a good technical level of competence. And their role really is to go into the business and talk about the particular needs. But before we do that, we need to understand what they do. So we'll talk about the products and services and routes to market. We'll then start to look at the technologies that they've already adopted and plan to adopt within the business. We'll start to use some gap analysis toolkits, try and identify where the key priorities are, and then we'll start the process in that meeting of talking about some of the recommendations that we think they should consider. We'll then go away, write everything up into an action plan. We've got a couple of tools in the bag as well that we can introduce them to. We've got a fantastic platform which provides, it's almost like an MOT for your website and all your social media activity. And it's a platform that they can access and drill down into different components. And it outlines what good looks like, what they've got and where they can improve, but it also signposts to additional tools and information and guidance that can help them make those improvements. Most people don't know this, but we're the only business support program that produces and makes widely available a software essentials guide. So this basically is a software directory. It's fantastic. It outlines 41 different functions across a business and provides between 7 and 8 different solutions for it. So if you want to find out how you can control your social media content, or you're looking for a CRM system or a financial application or some security software or booking systems or payment systems, we provided an outline of the key products that are out there that are suited to the SME market in Wales. And then finally, it's very important that we sort of promote the wider support that's available in the private and public sector. So as a final sort of closure to our service, we make sure that we signpost businesses to what other provision and support is available to them. If they ask us for information on what other organisations can provide these services, what we always recommend is they go back to the main Business Wales website and actually use the business directory, which is fantastic. And you can search for products and services to local providers and get a list of options there as well. So that's the sort of customer journey in terms of what they got. What I wanted to do was just play a quick case study, just so you can hear of a recent experience from an organisation who's been through the programme.
David, I don't know if you can hear me, but you need to enable the system audio on your screen share, please.
Sorry, Max, could you repeat that?
David, we can see the case, but we can't hear it. And I understand you need to enable the system audio on your screen share for us to hear the case study. We can't hear it.
Okay. Apologies for this technical glitch. Could you just, Philip, are you on the line? Could you just confirm how I can put the audio up so everyone can hear it?
Yes, David. You'll need to stop sharing, and when you start sharing again, there'll be a checkbox which will give access to system audio.
I'll tell you what, just for conscious of time, what I'll do is if we could send out a link to the case study, would that be okay? I can talk through the case study very quickly. I'm just very conscious that we've got the Minister on at 11 o'clock, and I want to make sure that I don't go over for that presentation.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Fantastic. So the case study in particular, they're Spiffy. They're an organisation that have a key thematic objective, which is about around mental health and supporting individuals. During the pandemic, they've had to close the shop, and which has had quite a significant impact on them. But what they found is because they were early adopters of new technologies, both in relation to their e-commerce platform, the social media activity, and also the way that they engage with audiences, both in the local community and wider community across Wales and abroad, they've been able to adapt and diversify their business model, which allows them basically to transact online. As a direct result of that, though, they've noticed that through promoting their products and services online and creating awareness, they've actually, over the last few months, increased their headcounts by bringing on 8 people, which has been a fantastic result. And they've since now, obviously, with the fire break ended, they've opened up their store again, and they're going through quite a progressive level of growth right now. So I'd recommend you do have a look at the case study, and apologies for not being able to present that to you today properly. Just moving on very quickly then. So in terms of the demographic that we've worked with, as I've mentioned before, we've delivered around 1,100 workshops to date. About 5,800 individual businesses have attended those workshops, and 4,800 have progressed on to the one-to-one appointments with a digital business advisor. What we have noticed over the last 6 to 9 months is a lot of businesses that traditionally would have gone straight to a one-to-one appointment have deferred that activity just for a while, and mainly because a lot of those businesses have actually gone into hibernation. So they're attending multiple workshops at the moment, but they're actually not ready to do that tailored one-to-one support because they're unsure of what the future looks like right now. So we're expecting, as we progress on into the new year, a high number of those to actually re-engage and then progress on to those one-to-one sort of appointments. To date, those Inspiring Action workshops, we've had over 9,000 participants attend, which represent 8,100 businesses, of which 5,800 are registered on the programme. And the rest of those numbers really account for those who've gone back and attended more than one of those workshops. And we've seen a huge amount of added value. In fact, I think there's about 2,000 hours worth of additional value being presented to businesses by attending multiple workshops just during the pandemic alone. In addition to that, we have our partnership managers who are doing a huge amount of outreach activity. They've attended around 100 or delivered 160 upskilling events over the duration of the contract, which has supported nearly 4,000 participants as well. So in terms of the demographic, we do know that obviously the market in Wales is very different from the rest of the UK. So if you look at self-employment nationally throughout the UK, it's about 15.3% average of those that are unemployed are actually self-employed. But if you look at areas like Cardiff, for instance, it's 28% of the working population that's employed are actually self-employed. So we have a huge demographic in working with the very small micro businesses on this programme. This is reflected both in the turnover, but an interesting one is in relation to the year's trading. We're seeing a higher level of businesses that are trading between 1 to 4 years, and we're also seeing a very good succession rate in terms of those that are proceeding on from 12 months plus. So I think the average in Wales at the moment is about 80% of businesses will trade for more than 12 months of things, and we are part of the mechanism that's giving direct support to them. As we progress then into looking a bit more on demographic, we can see that there's a slight majority of businesses are male owners than female, with a 6% variance between the two there. And the most prominent age group is between the 25 to 44 age group, with 24% of total businesses actually being Welsh speakers. If we look at the adoption rates of change, then this is probably the most important part, because this is the outcome of the activity that we do. We've contacted about 1,700 businesses, and 80% of them have said they've already adopted a change or plan to adopt a change. And we're seeing for those who've already adopted, they've adopted at least 3 of our recommendations. We tried to categorize this into 3 areas. The high impact, so these are sort of harder to implement but high impact outcomes. We've got those that are mid, so they're slightly easier to implement with a high outcome, and then we've got the low, which basically are easy to implement a more moderate level of outcome. So a high impact one could be financial commercial software like an MRP or a CRM system. A mid could give you an example, could be something like an e-commerce platform, or using voice over IP, so using the internet for your telephony system. And then a sort of low impact could be something like introducing a time management system or a booking system on your website, or in fact actually producing a content management system, a website-based website, and publishing that online. So in essence, giving yourself a virtual online presence. So these are quite significant figures that we've got here. So we're seeing that sort of out of the 1,500 businesses who've said they've adopted a change at the moment, around 15% of them are adopting both a high, medium and low adoption change in the business. When we look at those who've attended the workshops and to see what they've adopted, we see, for instance, that we're averaging around 80% of participants have adopted some change, which again reflects the one-to-one support. But we can see in areas like cybersecurity, where we have slightly lower volumes of people going to those workshops, they've adopted 100% of adopted recommendations based on what we've done. We see a slight variable in relation to those that have gone through the sector-specific workshops, notably agri, and that's simply because of the great work that Farm and Connect do. They're set up to purely work with these businesses, so they've given a lot of information, advice, and guidance around diversification. So on average, we see just 2/3 adopt the recommendations that we put forward to them. There is a fantastic website. I'll close off just now, just to close off. If you do get the opportunity to have a look at it, we've got over 120 case studies that are on there that represent the organisations that we've been working with over the last number of years. There's a lot of information, guidance, access to the Software Essentials directory and so on, also on the main Business Wales Superfast website. So if you do get the opportunity to have a look at it, that would be great. And just to close off, as we progress into next year, we are looking at reintroducing face-to-face components of the service. I think it's important to build that public confidence. And we're looking at the potential models about how that can be reintroduced as we progress into the new year. I think the key thing is that the service is available. We'll be continuing on into September 22. And if you are in a position to and you'd like to attend one of our workshops, do please let us know. And that's more information. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for that presentation. Before we move on, we're about halfway through our programme now. Can I just remind you to start thinking about any questions you have for our speakers. Please feel free when the time for Q&A comes at around 11:30, 25 to 12. Please either put your questions into the meeting chat or just have them ready, if you like, on the microphone. We can use the hands up function. Okay, so I'm delighted now to welcome to our seminar the Deputy Minister for Economy and Transport, Lee Waters. Lee has been intimately involved in the programme, supporting the programme, and indeed has been an important supporter of the research and intelligence around the Superfast work in Wales. So we're delighted to welcome you to the seminar, and I'll now hand over to the Minister.
Thanks, Max. It's not often people are delighted to see me, so I'm genuinely moved by that. Thanks for giving me a slot this morning. I won't speak for too long. I've just been listening to the presentations and read the exec summary of the report, and it looks like certainly very interesting and very useful. I think what it shows me is that we've come a long way and we've got some way to go. I thought the figures on the level of number of firms who are still not exploiting digital was quite striking. Around 60% of firms you're showing as being either digitally disengaged or passive. Digital disruption is exploding around us all the time, and there's, I think, a big task to try and get the firms that are still trading to be far more digitally savvy and exploiting the opportunities that offers them as businesses. So lot more to do for sure, and the research is really useful for allowing us as policymakers to understand where the gaps are and how we can target our intervention. And I'm pleased that we've been able to commit to extending through an initial 1.5 million the digital support offered to businesses through the Superfast Wales initiative, so that we'll be able to keep going, because clearly that's still lots of important work to do. The other thing that we're doing, yesterday we launched our digital strategy for Wales as part of our response to the Brown Review onto the future of work and automation, and we're doing it differently. We've gone through an internal process with an expert body, advisors, as you might expect us to do. We've come up with, I think, a pretty good digital strategy, but rather than publish it and say, here it is, I really want to kick the tires, and I really want your help in that. So we've published it. We are publishing it in the next couple of weeks in chapters, in draft, to crowdsource your thoughts on how we make it better. So if you look at my Twitter feed, I'm at Amanwy, AMANWY, or if you look at the Welsh Government's Data and Digital blog, you will see the first chapter was put up yesterday. I think the next one is tomorrow, and we'll be consulting in an open source way with you all for a chance for you to criticize, comment, and suggest improvements. And I think by doing it that way, and we hope still to get a final strategy published. There's the link being put up very helpfully in the sidebar. We'll be able to get the final strategy agreed by March, but I hope it'll have far greater buy-in and far greater reach by doing it this way. And also because the nature of digital change being so rapid, and because government, I think, has done a lot, but is only ever going to have a degree of the expertise that's going to be in broader civil society. There are far more people out there than there are in here who understand this agenda, and it will be very helpful to help us spot any gaps or any areas that we can raise our game. So I hope that you will engage with that process and help us to get as strong a digital strategy as we possibly can. And part of that strategy is about the application of digital. And that's, for me, what came out of the report today as well. We have focused effectively at infrastructure. So when without the Superfast broadband scheme, only about 40% in households would have fast broadband. Now we're up to 95% of households in Wales with Superfast broadband. But having the kit is only part of the picture. And how do we make sure people use the digital capability to bring about improvements into people's lives? Because that is what digital is about. So we have recently set up a digital centre for public services in Ebbw Vale. 2 years ago, before I became a minister, I led an expert panel looking at how we could improve digital in the public sector. And Sally Meacham, who was on that panel with me, then came into government, did a piece of work, a discovery phase, to understand what the gaps were within public servants of understanding and using digital, having the skills and the tools. And she has now taken that forward, is now leading the centre. We've got a small team based normally in Ebbw Vale who are leading that work, and that's going to be doing three things. One is going to be a hub of expertise, a go-to place for the public sector to test their ideas and get help. Secondly, a place where change happens. So we are going to have a series of digital transformation squads. The first one is at working with 3 local authorities, Neath Talbot, Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent, looking how we can digitally transform access to adult social care. So working with end users, working with the teams in local authorities to change the way that service interacts with people to improve the end product. And then also it'll have a role in terms of digital standard setting, because that is absolutely crucial to make sure that we are all getting the most of our collective knowledge and setting standards that's applied in a way that brings reasonably equal outcomes. And as part of that, we are creating a sort of digital leadership ecosystem. So we have a new Chief Digital Officer in Wales, Glyn Jones. We have a newly appointed Chief Digital Officer for local government in Wales, Sam Hall, based with the WLGA, and we have a commitment to appoint a Chief Digital Officer for the NHS, and they're going through the process of creating a new digital age body to take forward NHS use in Wales. And then, so there's some of the innovation that's already releasing. We've done a piece of work, and I'm conscious in terms of the change of digital. It is often seen as a threat, and disruption is seen as a negative thing. And it's really important, I think, that we create and shape a framing and a narrative that now, which puts that on the right trajectory. So one of the projects that we've seen Caerphilly Council develop themselves is a good use of robotic process automation, not to cut budgets or reduce headcount, but to free up people to enable them to do critical work. So they've been working with Codebase 8, a small business based in Llanelli, where I represent, as it happens. And they have automated the application for free school meals. Up till now in Caerphilly, and that's true across Wales, you've got people falling into difficulties, desperate for help to feed their children, and having to wait 5 days for a decision on whether or not they're eligible for free school meals. And through RPA, we're now able to do that instantly and start administering the support straight away. So that, I think, is a really service improvement, helping people at most need at the time they most need it, but also then freeing up staff in the catering department in Caerphilly to do other urgent work. So I think that framing of a social good and releasing people to do things that people can best do rather than doing jobs that machines can do better, I think is a very, very important way that we set our framing on this. There are lots of other initiatives as well. Very pleased that the 4 Welsh universities have come together. Not something that happens too often, but we've got Aberystwyth, Bangor, Cardiff and Swansea all collaborating, responding to the recommendations of the Brown Review to create a Data Nation Accelerator, they're calling it, to do R&D, but also to do application of the R&D that the university sector is generating. And that is still being shaped. And we're talking to UK government and funding agencies for how that might be implemented. So I think that is the nub of the points I wanted to make this morning. Happy to take part in discussion and answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee, for covering off those matters for us. Well, we're about 20 minutes away from the Q&A now, so I'm hoping that the Minister might be able to stay with us for the Q&A. But before that, we have our last speaker. I'm pleased to welcome Professor Pete Burnap from Cardiff University. Pete is Professor of Data Science and Cyber Security at Cardiff. He's also Director of our EPSRC Academic Centre of Excellence in Cyber Security Research. So Pete this morning is going to talk to digital economy developments in Wales and business support. We look forward to your presentation, Pete. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the intro and the invitation to be here this morning. So the Minister's teed me up really nicely there, because my talk is really going to be around how we've worked with SMEs in the South East Wales region through the Data Innovation Accelerator, which is actually one of the precursory activities to the Data Nation Accelerator. So absolutely a perfect timing, and I'm going to give you an overview of how it works, how you can work with it from an SME perspective, and pick up hopefully some of the points that were made earlier on. So a bit of background on the Data Innovation Accelerator. It was established in response to demand. Myself, as a co-founder with Professor Roger Whittaker, do a lot of work with data. I myself have been seconded to Airbus in the past and worked on AI innovation for cybersecurity with them. I've also run knowledge transfer programs with the likes of Admiral. These are big companies with obviously budget to be able to invest in R&D and data analytics, etc., and ask questions like, how could data work for me? How can I put data and AI to work for me within my organization? And what we found, actually, almost as a result of that, or perhaps at the same time as that, SMEs were approaching us and asking, how can business work for us? So basically, due to the critical numbers of people that were approaching us at the university, myself, Roger, and others, we approached a WEFO to essentially fund a data innovation accelerator, which would be very much targeted at working with SMEs with a remit to build data science awareness. I mean, and that also encaptures AI, machine learning, data analytics, etc., even basic stats across the region. So the overarching aim was to try and get some of that really good R&D that we've done at the university and skills and knowledge, etc., out of the university into businesses in Wales and uplift their economic prosperity, essentially. Pick up on some of those points that Laura made in her early talk and build on this infrastructure, as the Minister just said. This is getting on the tools and doing the work and ensuring that there's value add to the Welsh economy, and that's precisely why we set up the Data Innovation Accelerator. So the DIA is a significant size team. There are myself and Roger, if you like, oversee it and direct it, but we are very much at that level. We have a very much an on-the-ground team, 2 senior data scientists who lead and run the show with a project manager and a business outreach lead, and we have a team of 6 to 7 data scientists. So there is a significant body of expertise and knowledge who are working in the Data Innovation Accelerator from 2018 up to next year. We've basically got a very well-refined way of working with SMEs now, and a robust program that allows SMEs in the region to engage with us. What my talk today really is just going to tell you about some of the stuff that we've done and who we've worked with and what they've got out of it, to give you an example and a flavour of this support that is available. So this is, you know, very, very brief overview of the region. The shaded region there is the area in which we work, and the little pins there are companies with whom we have worked. So as you can see, they're not all in the city centre. There is obviously a critical mass of tech in the city centre, but you can see that they are also spread around into the regions, both in the south and in the north. And the areas, or thematic areas, if you like, in which we are working are listed there. I won't go through them all, but as you can see, it's certainly not just tech. We're reaching out into many different areas, some of whom, quite interestingly, were picked up in Laura's talk earlier on as core areas that were, if you like, engaging in with advanced tech. So how does it work? I think this is one of the key things, I suppose, for the people on the call, is how it works. So as I said earlier, we have a business liaison officer, Linda Hellard, for those of you who don't know her. She's excellent. Many years of experience of working with SMEs and big companies in the region. She will initially sit down with you, put you in touch with the guys in the team, have a brief chat about what you want to try and get out of the activity and the exercise. We will then set up a meeting where we'll have some of our data scientists sit with you and just literally get to know your business. This is not something, if you like, that we do to you. This is a collaborative project. It's a collaborative endeavor. We just sit and listen, help prompt the discussions about what you would like to do with your data, what you'd like to see out of it, where you would like your business to go, and just ask those questions that some people might say are stupid questions, but there are no stupid questions. You know, the point of the exercise is, a lot of people, I think, are thinking, how can data work for me, right? So it's about asking those questions and helping you sort of get grips to how it could help you. One of the things we found at the start, and why we set this up, is because SMEs in particular, their job is running the business. They don't have a lot of budget to go and hire a data scientist. So there is a big question of, actually, is there value in me hiring a data scientist? Is there value in me spending time working with data? Question mark. And so part of that is answering those questions and getting those questions pinned down. The two, I suppose, activity-based sections then are the health check. So the health check and the collaborative R&D project I will go through in a bit more detail now. So some of the benefits of data science to SMEs, again, interestingly, picking up on Laura's points earlier around being able to do market analysis, business intelligence, optimization of activities, advertising and marketing, improving products, both in terms of optimization, but also USPs, new offerings that can be added to your existing services, improving the optimization of your own business processes within your company. It's not all about new products and services. And also, additional aspects around, if you like, data management, optimum use of data, putting data to work for your business, and then, putting my other hats on, the cybersecurity aspects of it, security and fraud. So those 2 points I mentioned earlier, the critical activity areas. The first is the data innovation health check. So the idea here, as you can see from the pictures, is very interactive. The team will whiteboard a session. This has traditionally been done, obviously, face-to-face. COVID's put a bit of a stopper on that for the time being, but there are so many digital technologies, and again, picking up on the points earlier, people have access to both the technology in terms of the infrastructure and the tools to allow collaboration, etc. So the idea then is to develop themes, potential areas of data analytics that might benefit you as a company. Again, looking at perhaps the optimization or particular areas of your product that you would like to develop, etc., etc. What the team will then do is to basically show you the art of the possible, sit with you, show you, for example, things that can be done in terms of time series forecasting, sentiment analysis, market analysis, etc., etc. Give you some ideas, I suppose, so you're not working with a blank sheet of paper. The outcome of that will be a report, and the report itself actually is it's a very decent document, I have to say. It really gives you a critical analysis of where you are as a business in terms of your data you have, how it could be used, your readiness, if you like, as an organization to engage with the process, and it'll put some recommendations and next steps in. So some of the recommendations might be, perhaps you need to further investigate your data, perhaps you need to have a further think about how you might identify ways in which you could exploit that data. But many of these actually then come to the point where we say, well, the next steps actually are probably that we could work with you to develop a product, a collaborative project. Now, how these work is that they are not, again, I repeat, it's not us doing things to you, and we also won't just come and deliver a product, if you like, on your doorstep at the end of the project and expect you to take that on. The purpose is, in the title there, it's collaborative. The purpose is to sit with you during the project, shape the project, but also shape its integration into the business. So we'll want to work with you from the start to work out at what point will we start working with you on handover to ensure this is integrated into your products and services, into your daily business processes, to make sure that this actually is put into practice and not just ends up as shelfware. So these are typically 4 to 6 months. They'll align to what the company can do, of course, at the time. Again, interesting, picking up on one of Laura's comments earlier that SMEs, if you like, have used the furlough period or used the lockdown period where potentially other business lines have, if you like, slowed a little bit to really engage with this process, the innovation process, and think about how they can uplift themselves during this period. So that's been great to see. Any time invested in the project is matched or exceeded by the company. This is it's a collaborative project, so it's not a consultancy. It's not essentially a service either. It's us extending our hand, if you like, as the university with a lot of expertise in data science, and saying, come work with us, spend your time working with us. We'll spend our time working with you on dedicated tasks, and at the end of it, there'll be decent proof of concept that you can then take forward into your business line. So I promised some basic case study ideas. This is where I might look like a bit of a charlatan, because as I said, I'm not actually on the tools. We have a fantastic team of people that do this, but obviously I take a very strong interest in these case studies because for me personally, one of the things that we really want to see coming out of this is case studies. It's Welsh companies putting their hand up and saying data worked for us. This is how we've used it. This is how it's improved our businesses, and hopefully get that message spreading throughout the whole of Wales so that the SMEs that were previously asking the questions of, can data really work for me? Is it really worth me engaging with it? That they basically say, yeah, right, well, we've seen what company X, Y, and Z have done. It's worked for them, and we want to get involved in that. We want a piece of that action. And then we uplift the whole nation, right, which is essentially, as the minister alluded to earlier, the next step is to take this to a data nation accelerator and really drive forward R&D and get that into the businesses using and piggybacking on these processes that we've developed over the last 2 years or so. So first one, simply do ideas. They're basically a platform used to crowdsource solutions. Very interesting that the digital strategy has been done in that way as well. Fantastic to see. And ideally then what they're trying to do is to take a whole bunch of crowdsourced data and summarize that. Ideally what they're trying to do is reduce the burden to the business of summarizing all these crowdsourced ideas. So might be something Welsh Government want to look at, simply do ideas and see if there's anything that they can use in regards to this to the new data strategy. See if the tools can actually work for the government as well. So what we did is work with natural language processing methods. We took the data that tends to come in free text, as you can imagine, survey responses, open letters, etc. And we presented those in a new way, something that was, if you like, easier to dig into, something a bit more meaningful. And now the clients have actually found that they can make the business decisions based on these shorter, bursty, more succinct summaries rather than having to plow through a whole load of text. So immediately improved optimization. There you go. You can see a little image on the left-hand side here. This is essentially how we've taken large amounts of text and summarized those into visualizations, and we've got a nice little testimonial there from Simply Do. Second one, talent intuition. So this is all about making, if you like, human capital, human expertise as readily accessible as business intelligence. It's basically about trying to work out what jobs are out there, how to map those into some sort of taxonomy, and then how to map those onto talent availability. As you can imagine, it's quite a hard job matchmaking CVs to talent. But again, you can see on the left-hand side here how that we've actually managed to create this sort of hierarchical taxonomy model and visualization that will allow you to do interactive search and match jobs onto your people with expertise. This is now being put into this new Strategens product, which is, again, trying to get candidates' attributes automatically identified. One of the interesting things here, of course, is that this is engaging with that whole aspect of AI and visualization in an area that needs strong ethical consideration. Obviously, this is basically matching people to jobs. So there's a very strong ethical position on this project, and a lot of time was spent dedicated to understanding the decisions that were being made around that. Third case study was W2 Global. So this was about anti-money laundering and fraud due diligence, basically. With this one, they actually wanted to generate, if you like, personally identifiable data such that they could share it in a way and do, if you like, analysis to test their anti-fraud methods. But of course, we can't share personally identifiable data, again, picking up on that ethics point. So what we did is we worked with some of our academics in the cybersecurity team to develop what we call fully automated differentially private synthetic data, which basically means it's realistic data. You can trust it's realistic, but you can't actually reverse engineer it and extract personal attributes from it, which then has allowed W2 Global, obviously, to really up their research and innovation in this kind of fraud detection activity, while ensuring trust and security. Again, nice little testimonial there from Kevin at W2 Global. This, incidentally, has also led to a publication at a top research conference as well. So it really shows the overlap between research and development and turning this into economic productivity. I think the last one then, Eat Sleep Media. So this is a different way of looking at things. This was all about public media material, and Eat Sleep Media are about to launch a new online women's football show called Ballers. Again, they're looking at getting useful feedback from the pilot, identifying attributes of the target audience, so demographic analysis and the content they're engaging with. Again, we work with them to sort of generate the surveys, but then also summarize the data coming back, give them good insights into who's engaging with it, how they could outreach more, who they could outreach with, and started to turn this into like storyboards, automated storyboards to communicate insights, because these guys are really looking for investment as well. So it's sort of telling a narrative about what they're doing, how it's working, and why people might want to invest in it as a particular product. Sorry, one more, actually, picking up on, again, going back to Laura's talk earlier about sort of transportation engagement with this. So P&A Group, where they ship a lot of stuff around. Last year, there were 3,000 truckloads of stuff where basically they weren't full. So it was looking around how we can use data science to help improve the sort of the load fill performance. We did a bunch of stuff around capturing freight metrics. We mapped those. We looked at various methods to optimize how things could be loaded in a different way, looked at how they could more efficiently load their vehicles and transport those around, which helps, obviously, P&A Group. They do less trips, but that was also, very good for the sustainability agenda as well. Less trucks on the road for less time, etc. So additional social benefit then from that particular exercise as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff kicking off at the moment. Again, these slides really to show the range of different sectors engaging with it. Avra looking at sort of cutting edge, top end fashion. Health and Her looking to predict age of menopause and through mobile apps. IDWAL is about predictive analysis of vessels. Sustainable energy, time series forecasting for energy consumption. And Talent Ticker, again, looking at the sort of recruitment side. So these are all sort of ongoing projects at the moment, and demonstrates huge variety and diversity in the types of sectors that are engaging with it. So I think that is me. This is the team. These are the guys that are working on the project, which again you can also see there's really good sort of diverse team that we're bringing together here. Very different range of mindsets and perspectives. So this is the email address to reach out on. please do. We're here and ready to work with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much to Pete, and thank you to the rest of our speakers. I have to admit, that's probably the first conference session I've ever had to go through where I've not actually had to beat the speakers around the ears for keeping to time. That's quite remarkable. I doubt if that will happen again for a long time. But thank you all for keeping to time there. That's really helpful. Made my life a lot more easy. Okay, so we have a little opportunity now for questions and hopefully answers linked to the presentations. So Pete, Laura Reynolds, Laura Norris, and David are still on the call, still on the line. So it is over to you now. I have got some questions already that have been coming through the chat function. So can I ask? We'll have to be careful with the unmute function here. Perhaps I'll kick off with asking some of the questions from folks who have appeared on the meeting chat, and then I'll direct these questions to members of our panel. So if I can start, please, there's a question from Michael Gross in Welsh Government, who we've been working very closely on this project. He has a question for Laura Norris. He's saying that Laura mentioned the reality of superfast access and digital tools having mitigated some of the impact of COVID on businesses. And he's asking whether Laura thinks there is any way of being able to actually quantify that. So I open that up to Laura, and perhaps Dylan Henderson as well, who's the project manager on this, might also want to chip in on that one. So over to you, Laura.
Thanks, Max. And that's quite a question, Michael. I guess really the long and short of it is that we ask people. We've obviously in the survey this year asked people a lot of detail that I wasn't able to go into in the time of the presentation, but we understand how people are reacting by sector, we understand how they're reacting by region, and we understand how they're reacting across the rural and urban. So there's a lot of detail that is coming out, so it would be sensible to ask them another sort of survey type questioning, and then it would be asking them how they think their business would have performed without these technologies and with these technologies. I mean, the difficulty is that there's these figures aren't created in isolation. So there's the counter narrative that the advice, the government legislation at the time was that you work from home where possible. And if it was not possible to work from home, you would go into the workplace. So those, I guess, and I think maybe Dylan might have some thoughts on this. I don't know, rope him into this one because it's a complex question. Would be, we'd have to establish that counter narrative of those businesses that if they couldn't have digitized, they would have been operating from their office space anyway. So I guess there's a difficulty in that, but I guess the main way would be to ask. What do you think, Dylan?
You're on mute, Dylan. You're on mute.
No, he's still on mute.
I think we're having a. Okay, no. Okay. What I'll do is I'll move on. I'll move on, if I may, to the next to the next question. There's a question from Steph Locke here. It's a question really for the broader panel. So for all of you, and it's how far can local small and medium-sized enterprises contribute to supporting change across Wales? And I'm guessing the spirit of this question is, well, perhaps around, how significant are SMEs in the business population? I mean, how far can their adopting digital resources really be a driver for change in the wider Welsh economy? So that's a question. I mean, perhaps I'll start with David on that one. David Marnell.
Yeah, I mean, we have multiple touch points with the SME sector, obviously on the programme, through both telephone, physical, and then through the one-to-one supports available to them. What we see is where confidence is built really is actually in that peer-to-peer engagement, notably in the physical workshops. So, for instance, as we bring in subject matter experts, external local providers who come and present on our Inspiring Action workshops, and they are subject matter experts on that particular topic. But where we see the more positive engagement is actually when the audience stands up and says, oh, I've done that. That's worked for me. And we'll see then more engaging conversation through those, either through the break sessions or through the Q&A sessions in the workshops. And that has a real notable impact on that conversion rate of change. And that's why our programs and other programs like ours see the value in case studies and getting that information out, because it demonstrates what good practice looks like, and more notably, what the impact of that is. So I think communication is key. I think the SME market plays a significant role in influencing the SME market, but the difficulty is really getting that communication out to the marketplace and, being able to identify what the impact, what the outcome has been. And Wales, I think, to be honest with you, with the range of support and engagements out there, is in a unique position comparative to, say, England, simply because there's a more wealth of business engagement and support available in Wales than what there is in most areas of England at the moment. So we've got a good opportunity to influence it, but it is really about making sure that the SMEs are engaging with other SMEs themselves. And we see a lot of that activity take place.
Okay, thank you, Dave. David, there's another question for you from Dylan Henderson. To what extent do you think has Superfast Business Wales supported businesses to adopt digital technology versus innovating in terms of new services and products?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, with any new technology that's been adopted, especially when we look at those high and mid impact changes at the bank, you'll usually find there's a degree of innovation. So they'll be adjusting systems, processes, routes to market, and various other things. So we see significant change there. But in terms of new products and services, traditionally those businesses have already got a concept, an idea, or they've already got something that they want to bring to market. So we will not really necessarily influence their decision about, offering new services or diversifying their core activities. But what we can do is, once they've got an idea, we can enable that further and hopefully get them to a position to that. So what I mean is, I mentioned before about Office 365, and 5 years ago when we were talking to especially the mid-market sector, most of them were still using a lot of infrastructure locally, weren't using really cloud computing. And we've seen quite a significant change even before COVID and the pandemic took place. We were seeing a significant shift of people moving to cloud technologies, and then starting to adopt the additional functional benefits that offers, such as automation, which has been referenced several times during the presentations today, Power BI, and being able to actually look at data in a different way. And you can do this very quickly within Power BI functionality within Office 365. And it can present information to the business that can really influence decisions. So being able to identify quickly who the most profitable customer and what the best products are, and who the best suppliers are, and who the best salespeople are, can make quite significant changes within a business and how they approach their market, and also engage with their employees and teams and supply chain and so on. So I think, in terms of our influence on it, we're just there to give them that information provision and guidance, and hopefully articulate it in a way that gives them confidence that they can actually investigate and take those recommendations forward. But on average, 68% of businesses have already adopted those recommendations, 12% plan to, or it's work in progress. So we've got 80% there. The remaining 20%, we have looked at that data, and what we're seeing with them is that the majority of them, we're validating what they're already doing. So that gives great encouragement. Or alternatively, they don't have the financial, the capital investment, the resource, or the ability, the capacity to actually take those recommendations forward. And I think that's where that's an area that we need to address, really, is to enable those change for those types of organizations. So does that answer the question, do you feel, Max, or is there anything I've overlooked?
Steph Locke, would you mind unmuting, because I may have got the wrong end of the stick, so to speak, with your question, Steph. Would you like to just come back on that?
Sure. So essentially, as a business owner in data and AI, I would love to help make Superfast and all the initiatives more successful. How can myself and other businesses like mine get involved to help you?
I think that's possibly a question for you, David, again.
Yeah, certainly. What I'd suggest, Steph, it might be worthwhile contacting the Superfast team and maybe talking to our partnership managers. So I'd mentioned that we deliver embedded workshops, and the idea of the embedded workshops, these are open engagement events. They help promote the benefits of digital technology. And we bring in individuals and organizations that come in and we'll talk about a particular topic. Now, we've had over 4,000 delegates attend these workshops. Outside of that, our partnership managers have probably attended about 400 external events as well. So we proactively engage with various conferences and events and so on. But it could well be that by engaging with the partnership managers, we could invite you to speak at one of these future events and talk about the importance of data and how it can influence business decisions and so on. So what I would say is if we could facilitate an introduction here, I think David Ellesmere, who's one of our partnership managers, is actually on the call today. But if you could reach out via the event organizers, I can put you in touch with David and Collis O'Neill, our two partnership managers, and perhaps that could be a way. But I think it's a great way to demonstrate and to engage with your target audience, but also for ourselves to demonstrate what they need to be thinking of in order to benefit from both digital technology, but more importantly, data as well.
Okay, thank you, David. I just want to wait for some other questions to come in. I've got a question for Pete Burnap. Pete, I think one of the things that's been of interest to me down through years, I mean, we seem to within the university at Cardiff to have strong expertise now in areas of cyber, security, data science. I guess my question is, do we see any evidence? I mean, while as a college we may have very good research outputs in the field, do you see any evidence that the university is leading on the creation of spin-outs, but based on the research that we're doing and the advances that we're making? Is there any evidence of spin-out new SMEs starting to be born as a result of that, perhaps with university ownership?
So to date, not so much. I mean, I know that the university does have a big profile in spin-outs, apparently third in the UK at the moment in terms of spin-outs more generally. But in terms of the AI and cyber stuff, no. Our focus to date has really been on sort of translating research into existing business processes, whether at the big or the small level, rather than actually spinning those out, if you like. We do have a program and a plan that is in development at the moment that will enable closer alignment between us and various incubators and cyber accelerators, so particularly around cybersecurity. Over the next, hopefully in the next 6 months, we'll start to see that, because there is definitely demand for it. We're seeing stuff that could be turned into a spin out. We've definitely got the IP there. We just need to sort of, I think, better arrange the mechanisms for doing so. There are some good academic support programs out there, but I think they kind of work on the assumption generally that there is already, if you like, a skill base in being able to develop a business model and develop a pitch, etc., which isn't always the case, you know, within a university environment. So we're working on better aligning on that. But I think certainly there is evidence that there is substance there to create startups and spin outs, certainly in cyber, probably also in data science and AI.
Thank you. There's a question for Laura Reynolds, who led on some of the case study and horizon scanning work around our research intelligence function. The question, Laura, is, you know, what do you believe might be the important policy implications to be drawn from elements of the case studies and the horizon scanning that's taken place?
Great, thank you. In both the case study synthesis and all of the horizon scanning reports and the synthesis as well, we detail policy implications as a part of the report. I didn't go into them in too much depth today because that's what tomorrow's focus is all about. But just as an overview of some of the key areas that they have tended to include, is that we've seen that there's been the rollout of Superfast broadband that's improved the fixed internet infrastructure. However, one of the areas that we're seeing in the case studies and in relation to the different technologies used in the horizon scanning is that there's increased need for mobile technology and mobile connectivity. And again, there seems to be some of the biggest differences in terms of connectivity now in relation to mobile connectivity, especially as we're moving from 4G into 5G, and some areas still don't have 4G. So this is a potential area that arises, but also, and linked to what Lee was saying as well, while we're improving in terms of the infrastructure, we still need to continue thinking about the adoption and the use and providing support for businesses and their workers, which we've been doing throughout, but continuing to do this, which, as we've seen from the different reports of the horizon scanning, might benefit from being sector specific in some areas. What's needed for maybe retail or hospitality might be different for construction and other areas. So having the sector specific support and improving this and developing it going forward is another area. And as we've seen, even in the last 12 months, the use and the adoption of technology, it changes. So just keeping abreast with developments as they go and responding to these changes as they develop. In terms of our AI and automation report, for example, looking about how future employment opportunities could be supported and looking longer term about supporting these changes now for what might come in the future. So these are some of the key areas, but each one, as I said, tends to have its specific policy implications that on the reports that are available. Does that cover everything?
Okay, thank you very much for answering that. Okay, there's a few more just a few more questions have come in. Who's going to want to take this one? But with respect to digital adoption among SMEs, I mean, we look for impacts in a number of ways. But is there any evidence, hard evidence, that the types of digital adoption that have been levered really through the Welsh government interventions, have they helped our SMEs to export, for example, or to raise finance? So, is there any way in which we've specifically sought evidence on how digital adoption helps SMEs to export? And obviously it's a very current issue with Brexit. So I'll throw that open to the panel. I think maybe I'll start with David on that one, because he's been at the coalface with a number of our SMEs.
Yeah, I think it's really it's very difficult to qualify and quantify simply because we just don't have the evidence for it. In terms of, when we contact businesses, 6 to 9 months post intervention to see what they've adopted based on our recommendations, we'll get a lot of narrative, quite subjective information, where they will reference about an increase in employment, so taking on additional staff or diversification and so on. And we do evidence that. That usually is a trigger then where we'd start to contact our marketing team and say, right, there's a great example here of what a business has done. And they normally convert through to our case studies. And there's a lot of information evidence in there, that is validated through their approval of the case study. But there's not enough data there to really to give any consistent and accurate information on that, really, from our own activity. We do get a lot of organizations who do change their operating models, target operating models, not just from systems and processes perspective, but in relation to products and services and routes to market. But again, unfortunately, I just don't have the data for it. What is worth noting is the main Business Wales programme of activity does focus on international export, and they are the subject matter experts on that, rather than ourselves. But we haven't really engaged with that strand of business support on any joint collaborative opportunities, to my knowledge, in relation to business engagement.
Thank you. There's Laura, you had your hand up to ask a question. Laura Reynolds.
Yes, I was just going to add to that similar with our case studies, this was an area that quite a few of our businesses discussed in terms of being able to extend their market reach and having access to Superfast broadband and the enabled technologies meant, as I noted in my presentation, that not only nationally but internationally they could extend their market. And there were some examples, one in particular, where they were able to move back to Wales and keep largely something like 95% of their business was international but based in Wales. So we have some quite stark examples of where the greater access to this infrastructure and technologies has meant they've been able to relocate back to Wales.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, now I think there's one. This will probably be the final question. There's a question from Laura Norris.
Sorry, Max, did you say that there was a question for me?
Sorry,
because I'd raised my hand.
Yeah.
Because I'd raised my hand. Yeah, it was further on that, really, is that in terms of looking at how sort of businesses can access these international markets, we've got a lot of the case study data that's showing how they are. But what's also been interesting in some of the research I've done has shown that actually we've got rural firms that are possibly accessing to a greater extent international markets than the urban firms. So sort of in terms of sort of future directions and economic development, these are actually really positive things that are coming out of the research, and we're able to show this in the data that we have.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, folks, I think we're almost down. I've just got a few closing comments to make, and then we'll be closing up this first session. I'd like to thank all the speakers: Pete, David, Laura Reynolds, Laura Norris, and the Minister. We're grateful for those contributions this morning. I'd also, from the perspectives of the research intelligence function around the Superfast Business Wales, I'd very much like to just take this opportunity to thank the wider steering group for the project. I mean, there are too many to name individually, but they've been a great help over the last 4 or 5 years in framing the research agenda. They've been an excellent sounding board for our research. And of course, the SMEs that have helped us with survey returns. There's still much to do. At one level, our project with Welsh Government, funded by Welsh Government ERDF monies, comes to an end at the end of the end of the year. But we still have plans to keep moving with elements of the project, particularly our digital maturity survey. We hope to continue that in some shape or form, resources permitting. And obviously, as a team, we're still seeking to develop outputs from the project in terms of publications, particularly at the moment, working on the productivity side, how digital adoption links to SME adoption, and we're also looking at how digital adoption links to business risks. So there's a few channels of work going on there, and they will go up on the website, our project website, in due course. Can I just in closing just remind you? Obviously, this is the first half of a 2-day workshop. So tomorrow is session 2, starting at 10 o'clock. That'll be chaired by Professor Tony Davis. And tomorrow, the focus very much, as Laura was intimating earlier, is around policy challenges and implications. And we're joined tomorrow, the participants tomorrow, Michael Groves from Welsh Government, speaking to the changing policy environment around digital interventions in Wales. Professor Phil Brown, his work was mentioned in presentations today. So Professor Brown will be talking about the review of digital innovation for the economy and future work of Wales. Then we have got 2 speakers from industry. Giles Phelps will be speaking about digital infrastructure and skills challenges for Wales, and Wayne Phillips from Amazon Web Services will be speaking about futures to watch this technology space. So we look forward to all of those presentations tomorrow. So I do thank you for joining with us this morning for this, and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.